This is the Legal Marketing Made Easy podcast, episode number 14.
Being successful in the practice of law requires more than just a law degree and a bar license. It also requires a firm grasp of legal marketing and understanding how to run a business. But where do you turn to get help figuring it all out? You turn to Jim Hart and the Legal Marketing Made Easy podcast. So if you're ready to take control, get more clients, and build a better law practice, then stick around. This is Legal Marketing Made Easy.
Welcome to the Legal Marketing Made Easy podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to join us today. I've got a great show for you today. I've got Scott Grabel on the line. But before we get to Scott and his introduction, I just want to give a quick shout out to Timothy Page, who produced the intro that you just heard. He did a fantastic job. I'm really happy with it. And I'm going to be using that intro going forward until I decide to change things up a bit. But Tim, if you're out there listening, you did a great job, and I really appreciate your help. With that, if you're looking to start a podcast for your law firm and you need help with an introduction, it's www.timthepage.com. Can really help you out with your introductions and your outros as well. So today, my guest is Scott Grabel. Scott attended the Thomas M. Cooley School of Law in Michigan, where he graduated with honors in 1994. In 1999, he started his own law firm, Grabel Associates, with the sole purpose to defend those accused of a crime. And this practice has now grown to a 7-lawyer firm that handles solely criminal defense matters. So let's get right into today's interview. Hi, Scott. Welcome to the Legal Marketing Made Easy podcast, and I just want to thank you so much for being on my call today.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, what I'd like to do is if we could just start out with you just kind of giving a brief description of your law practice and what you're doing right now, and anything else you want to add about that.
No, I'd be happy to do that. I have a criminal firm based out of Michigan. We handle firm cases throughout the entire state of Michigan, criminal only. I ended up going to law school out here and stayed out here and practiced for a while working for another criminal firm, and then sort of decided to go on my own in 1999. And actually, it's been terrific. And I live in Michigan. I have a couple kids, and basically practice throughout the entire state. I have 6 lawyers who work for me as well.
Well, great. Well, we're going to get really deep into all those things and talk more about your journey and your experiences and how you've grown to where you are today. But before we do that, I do want to ask you a quick question. So, what inspirational quote, if you've got an inspirational quote that really drives you, can you share that with our audience?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I'm a big sports fan, to be honest with you. And, a lot of times when I look at inspirational quotes, sometimes I look to sports metaphors. One of my favorite one is actually by Vince Lombardi, who obviously used to be the coach of the Packers. He said obstacles are what you see when you take your eyes off the goal. So that's probably one of my favorites. I think in the legal profession, like any profession, you see a lot of different obstacles, but you never should lose focus of what your goals are to get you to those goals.
Well, I think that's great. And, you know, as a business owner, you're a business owner, I'm a business owner, I can see, you know, how that would have a direct impact on our lives on almost a daily basis, because especially when you own your own law firm, you know, there's a lot of ups and downs, and you are going to hit a lot of obstacles, and you just have to push through it and know that the next month is a new month, and, you know, you never know what's going to come in the door or what's going to happen that's going to push your business forward. So I think that's a great quote. Let me ask you, when did you realize, now you graduated from law school back in 94 or so, is that right?
Yeah, about 94 and 95, that's correct.
Okay. So when did, you didn't start your law practice until 1999. So when did you realize that was something that you wanted to do?
You know, I worked for another law firm. You know, after I graduated law school, I worked at the Court of Appeals as a clerk for a short period of time, and then I kind of actually, believe it or not, did unemployment compensation for a few years. It was just something I kind of fell into to make ends meet. And then a friend of mine out of California I went to law school with had me go to work for a criminal firm for a couple of years. And I guess I would say after, a year or two or doing that, I sort of got the itch to say, geez, I think I could do this myself. I mean, obviously I was a little nervous to take the plunge, but I wanted to see if I can do it on my own. And this sounds silly, but I kind of said to myself, you know what? I'd rather take the chance and see what I can do on my own. And then at least if it doesn't work out the way I want, at least I don't have to use the cliche, what if? I decided that let me try. Worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, I felt like, I can go get a job at another law firm. This wasn't the only law firm in town, so to speak. So I said, look, better to try and fail than not to try at all.
Well, so let me ask you. So when you said it was after you started with your firm for a couple of years. So when you were in law school, did you ever think that was something you might want to do?
I got to tell you, in law school at that particular point in time, I think my goals were pretty simple. Graduate, pass the bar, and get a job. And I guess I was keeping it real simple. I really never, not that I didn't think that was a possibility, but I just never planned at least that far ahead where I was going to go. I sort of was going to let it take me where the wind takes me, so to speak. I kind of went with the flow a little bit.
That's so funny. Everyone is a little bit different. I mean, I know for me, one of the reasons I went to law school is I looked at it as an opportunity to gain a skill that I could then start my own business with. And then I know a lot of people that are just like you that went to law school and were just trying to get out and get a job, and it didn't happen until later. Well, let me ask you this. So when you finally decided that you were going to go out and start your own law firm, how did I don't know what your family situation was like, if you were married or still single at the time, but how did your family and friends react to that decision?
Well, I got to tell you, I was married at the time, with a couple kids. It was a risky situation financially because, to be honest with you, like a lot of young lawyers, I wasn't in the best financial situation at the time, but I think they were supportive of the decision, and I got a lot of positive feedback. So that certainly made it easier, and to make that plunge. But I got to tell you, at the time, I guess my credit cards were maxed, had student loans. So I guess you sort of say my back was against the wall. It probably wasn't. This was about 1999. It wasn't the best time probably to go out there and do it, but I think I kind of threw caution to the wind. And I don't know why. If I knew then what I knew now, I guess probably I might be a little bit more apprehensive. But I guess you could say I was young, and I guess I'm more optimistic than maybe people would be at a later point in time. But I took the chance, and I'm glad I did. It worked out well for me. And
it sounds like you didn't have a whole lot to lose at that point. So, you're young and eager and ready to go, right?
That's the way I felt. I felt, that the one thing I do remember, even though that seems like a long time ago, I said, what's the worst that can happen? I can go get another job. This job that I'm leaving, I'm not saying it was bad, but it wasn't like I was, that the job was not replaceable. I was getting tired, and I thought, like so many people working for other firms, I thought I was underpaid, and I thought I had more to offer. But I'm sure we all feel that way. But I felt that way too, that I said, hey, I deserve more. And I actually asked for a raise. He turned me down, my boss. And I tell you, I sent a resignation letter that day. I got it on the computer too. I still have that resignation letter on my computer at home. I look at it every now and then for nostalgia purposes. I look at it.
Just to remind you where you came from.
Exactly.
So now you've been doing this for, sounds like about 15 years now, right?
That's about it. You're right. It's been a long. It seems like a lot shorter. It seems like yesterday, but yeah, it's been about 15 years. You're right.
So I'm sure there have been a lot of ups and downs along the way. Maybe you can share the story of perhaps a failure that you've experienced along the way and what you learned from it.
Well, obviously, like so many lawyers, I think we all remember the cases that we lost more than the ones that we win. So there's always those specific cases that you wish you had a chance to do the cases over with. I think a lot of times as a business owner too, I think you remember some of the marketing failures too. So, a lot of times I've tried different marketing techniques, and obviously trying to market our law firm statewide, which have been unsuccessful. Sometimes it's a difference with yellow page companies or, online advertising. I think a lot of lawyers have all been there. I can get more specific about that, but I think from those failures, you really do learn to build the product up, whether it be marketing or you learn from case failures to not make those same mistakes again. I guess that's how you learn from your mistakes, of course.
Can you think of one specific example of something, maybe a marketing campaign that you used that you thought maybe you spent a lot of money on that didn't work, or something like that really you felt like that was really stupid and we'll learn from that, we're never going to do that again?
I don't necessarily say at the time. I do remember one offhand because it was a substantial amount of money. It was probably around, I went with a Yellow Page company. I guess I'll say unnamed, to be fair. I'll protect everybody. But you know what? I was doing relatively well with the Yellow Pages, and it made sense to expand to a different company, even though they were in some of the same areas. But, cover a wider net, get more leads. And I spent about $75,000 with this particular company. And I think this was about 2003, so you could still see I have a pretty good memory about it. And I kid you not, we tracked all the cases from these Yellow Page ads, and I'm in a lot of Yellow Pages. I was at the time. It was very successful. And I think literally out of that $75,000 investment, I think I ended up getting about $10,000 or $12,000 worth of cases for a $75,000 investment. So, needless to say, I never did any more Yellow Page advertising with that company after that contract period was over with.
Wow. Well, that's certainly that is certainly an expensive mistake. So I appreciate you sharing that. Well, so like you said before, so you've grown from just yourself, I imagine, to now you've got 6 attorneys working for you and some other legal staff, I'm sure. Why don't you tell us about kind of how you got to that point and how you grew?
Well, I think what the evolution was, I think it's changed for everybody, at least in what I market as far as criminal lawyers. The internet has changed, I guess, vastly since, I started in 1999. And at that point, sure, the internet was there, but, with the advent of broadband and, smartphones, and we all know, obviously, we're all on the internet, we're all wired in. I think really the demographic as far as marketing, at least, and it may be a personal injury practice or a criminal practice or frankly any legal practice, we really get most of our leads online. And I think really what I think has changed to help us grow, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, is really understanding how to market yourself web-based wise. And it's a real dangerous area because it's like this. If you don't rank on page 1 of Google, you're in big trouble if you're trying to get most of your leads from the internet. So that to me is the biggest change that I see from when I started and now is the web-based lead generation from really Google. I mean, there's other search engines as we know, but I think to me, I got to tell you, we have a whole marketing area of the firm that is devoted to internet marketing. So I got to tell you, that to me is probably one of the biggest things we do, to grow and add lawyers and everything. But listen, you're not going to add lawyers and add staff if you don't have cases coming in the door, which I'm sure every lawyer asks about that. Well,
no, and let me ask you this, kind of as a follow up to that, because this is something that I know I'm interested in, and I know other young lawyers are interested in. I mean, you don't just go from one attorney to a 7-attorney firm overnight. And so I would imagine hiring that first attorney was probably a pretty scary thing because, all of a sudden you've got to train this person. You have to devote money and salary and expenses on this person, perhaps pay their bar dues, things like that. Can you talk to me about how you kind of went from that solo practitioner mindset to, hiring an attorney and then maybe hiring another one? I mean, how'd that happen for you?
I think it happens where, when we first started the firm, believe it or not, I was the marketing manager. I was the attorney. I guess I was everything.
I totally believe that.
Right. I think what happens is as you start to, do advertising, and of course, as your business hopefully grows where you're getting enough cases in, you start to realize that, listen, I'm only one person. And because the phones are ringing to a level that you can't do it all, you feel at least comfortable that you're bringing in enough revenue. And I took it in baby steps. When I came in, I was doing a lot of the cases myself. I was doing the lead generation. I was handling a lot of the incoming phone calls. And as we got busier, I then had the resources slowly to sort of acclimate and say, all right, I'm going to make the leap of faith now. I feel comfortable enough because the phones are ringing enough to where I'm going to bring in somebody to do some of the sales. And then I'm still doing the cases, though. So I'm still in the initial outset doing the cases.
So you're hiring a paralegal or somebody like that to answer the phones is what you're doing.
Right. We call them, a client analyst, a client service analyst, but basically somebody who just doesn't give legal advice, but sort of screens the calls to say, listen, what type of case do you have? Where's the case at? And then screens them to see if it's a good candidate for the firm. Then at that point, I would sometimes talk to the clients and we would pre-qualify and maybe talk, the legal aspects of it. And as we evolved and we got busier and busier, then, I decided to bring in some attorneys one at a time, invitation only, believe it or not, how we sort of invite attorneys to the firm. They usually come to me, believe it or not. And even in the early outset, I know people in the community, and we started slowly integrating attorneys. And remember, I worked for another firm, so I had a pretty good network of people that I knew throughout the state. So obviously, it's not like I have to reach out to somebody, hey, do you want to do cases in Grand Rapids or Detroit or Ann Arbor or Lansing? I knew people throughout the state through the other firm that I work with. So that sort of gave me a good foundation to have a network of people to work with. And as we got busier and busier, we just slowly added attorneys and added, obviously other resources to the firm. And that continues to this day, believe it or not. It's not, that hasn't changed. It just maybe not attorneys every year, but we've just added a recent one this year. We've added another one, but we have a marketing director. We have an in-house search engine optimization expert for that. And we have a blogger that helps us with blogging, with content. I mean, it's really become, you start out like Apple started out in the garage. I'm certainly not comparing myself to Apple. I wish I could compare myself to Apple. But, they started in the garage, and let's face it, the biggest company in the world. Now, I'm certainly nowhere near that or even close. But you start out in your garage, and the next thing you know, you got 7, 8, 9, 10 people working for you.
So, you said a bunch of things there, and a couple of things I want to touch on. So how long was it between when you started your own law practice and you did end up hiring your first associate?
I would say it would probably be around a year. I kind of wanted to feel solid enough that I could, that I had enough business to give the attorney enough cases. And, we do a little bit different in-house. We sort of, pay our attorneys case by case, and it's a sort of it's not your prototypical type of law firm, and it's sort of a reward basis. If the quality level's good, they get more cases and they get more, quality cases that they like and different things, or she likes, because we obviously have a female attorney on staff as well. So we did it a little bit differently. Our business model is different, but I wanted to feel like I had a solid foundation, that we had enough cases coming in where I didn't want to sort of let the rope go, so to speak. I would say about a year. I was doing most of the incoming cases the first year myself, a lot of them. Then we got so busy, to be honest with you, it really was, we didn't have a choice. It was like, I can't do these cases. We're so busy. It made it intuitively easy because we were bringing in enough cases where it didn't put a lot of pressure on me because the business was there. I guess it was a very, advantageous position to be in.
So let me ask you, how did you market yourself that first year? I mean, this is way back, very beginning of the internet type of stages.
Absolutely.
1999. I actually listened to a podcast yesterday with another attorney that interviewed the kind of the granddaddy of blogging for lawyers, and he said he started his blog in 97. So that's kind of where we're at. So this is the very infancy of the internet here. So what were you doing? Was it mostly Yellow Pages ad, or was it referrals?
I could tell you at that point, 1999 through 2003 was 100% Yellow Pages in our state. And, obviously every state demographically might be slightly different. Obviously right now, Yellow Pages in most states are, put this way, I would compare it to a dinosaur in most states. But, it still has some viability in rural areas. But back then, we were pretty much Yellow Pages 100%. There was no internet for us till 2003. I think I was kind of late in the game on that, if I could tell you that, at least the internet. I was late to get to the party.
It's amazing how things change over time, because there was a time when lawyers could just do that. Now, not so much anymore. So, well, what are you working on right now? Let's fast forward a little bit. What are you working on right now that really excites you about your firm? What are you doing? What are your plans?
Well, right now, I would say our plans, believe it or not, I do a small number of cases at this point. I'm still in there, but a much, much smaller number, where I keep a handful of cases across the state in a variety of different, whether it be felonies or misdemeanors or appeals. I argued sometime back at the Michigan Supreme Court a year ago. So I kind of pick and choose the cases I get involved with to still keep in the game, so to speak. But I would say my job at this point is more of quality control to make sure that my attorneys are doing what they're going to do. And also, I spend a lot of time, believe it or not, on our marketing. Our marketing, aspect, especially the internet, is ongoing, where we're in the process of developing, a lot of different videos. Now, obviously, we know Google owns YouTube, and going along with that we're doing a lot of custom videos that we're working on right now to reach out to our audience, our potential customers. And we do articles on the website. We have a news and media site that we do. We do some charitable work too. So we're kind of doing a lot of different things from a marketing standpoint outside, just running the firm.
Well, and I'm looking at your website right now. And so let me just ask you, is this a WordPress site?
It's being converted to WordPress, but everything on there is sort of, everything we put together from the logo to everything is custom.
Okay.
There's a lot of different people that go in there, and we have, obviously, there's what they call now is responsive design as well. When you go on a tablet or you go on a smartphone, that obviously it's ready for the user, so the user can use it in a way that's easy for somebody to use, obviously on an iPhone versus a Samsung Galaxy versus obviously an iPad or another tablet, where, the landscape's constantly evolving. And we are, put this way, the Yellow Pages used to be, hey, I'll see you next year, handshake, and that's the end of it.
Yep.
The internet, obviously, you and I both know, it's you better keep on at 365, 24/7, or you may run into a little problem.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with that. It's a nonstop job, really. And if you want to do things like on Facebook or Twitter, things like that, I mean, that's just even more time, because you have to do it right, you really have to do it almost on a daily basis. So, and you can batch some of those things, because you can schedule certain things to go out, but at the same time, it's just nonstop. But, well, let me ask you now, what is it you like most about having your own law firm? You've been doing this now for 15 years. What is it that you like the most about it?
Well, I'll tell you what the most I enjoy, and this is an example, whether it's me doing the case or another attorney. I was in court yesterday, and I think the most satisfying thing to me is getting the client feedback and saying how pleased they were with how we handled the case and how happy they were with just what we did for them. And, a lot of people are dealing with, pretty serious circumstances, whether it's jail, loss of license, loss of job. And the thing I find most satisfying, that really is what keeps me going, is the feedback from the clients, our clients. And I got to tell you, you never get tired of, hearing how happy they were and how glad they hired us as opposed to somebody else. That's truly the fuel. I mean, look, we certainly have to pay the bills like everybody else. I'm not going to tell you that we're out there doing this for free, but I got to tell you, when you get that kind of feedback, I'll tell you what, and it's a win-win. You're paying the bills and you're keeping people employed, but the clients are telling you how happy they were with the product. I'll tell you what, that's the best type of business you can have, where you feel like you're helping people, and you're also feeding the family. That's what makes it worthwhile.
Well, and I agree with that. And I got to say, one thing that about what you just said there that I think differentiates, like, your practice, you've got a criminal practice, a criminal defense practice, and I've got a family law practice. I think one of the big differences between our two types of practices is, for you, a good result for them, whether it's a plea deal that they're happy with, or not going to jail, or, a not guilty verdict, or whatever it might be. For them, that's a good result. For us, as you're a family law attorney, it's much harder because it's the whole process for them. It's not the end result, because a lot of times our clients are not necessarily happy with the end result because they're getting divorced and they're losing half their assets and they're paying a lot of money or not getting enough money. So for me, it's more the process is what keeps the clients happy. For you, sometimes I think maybe a criminal defense practice would be easier in that respect. I don't know. What do you think about that?
The one thing I like about it, I guess with most criminal cases, or all of them, unless you're talking about the appellate stage, you do get closure that maybe in the family law setting you don't, where there's either a trial and acquittal or the appeal where you get a decision from the appellate court, or, there's a plea bargain and the case is settled and the client's happy with the settlement. I agree that the closure compared to maybe a divorce or family law, is certainly a little bit more clear than it would be in a family court setting. And I do agree with that. When the case ends, a lot of times, and, we don't have a lot of contact with the clients. They're welcome to call. The door's always open. But I imagine with you, the door may be open a heck of a lot longer, depending on whether, there's obviously future issues, change of child support, and all the issues you deal with in the family court, saying change in custody, and it may be, a never ending thing. Like I know a lot of criminal lawyers that say, hey, I don't like to do divorce in custody. So it is a different type of practice. And, I couldn't imagine doing anything else at this point. Honestly, myself.
And I think the door is kind of cracked more than anything else. It's just kind of, and the cases are so much longer. I might work with a given client for 2 or 3 years versus, you might be with somebody for 3 months, 6 months. A felony case may be longer, but, the case is, over and done. I don't know if you remember, the Trayvon Martin case down in Florida.
Absolutely. I remember, believe it or not, I remember it very, very well.
And I actually used to practice down there. And Mark O'Meara, who represented, what was it? George,
Zimmerman.
Zimmerman. That's right. He was a family law attorney that practiced in Orlando as well. But, he did that one case, and would that last? A year, 18 months or something? And then the case is over now. And so there is some closure.
The only thing I learned from that case, obviously the result was he was successful. I don't think I would start out a murder case with a knock-knock joke. I think I learned that I learned not that I would ever do that. And he was successful, so you can't argue with it, but he took a lot of flack for starting the trial with a knock-knock joke. I do remember that about the case.
I do remember that too. So, all right, well, let's move in kind of the final stage of the interview here. With, I don't know if you want to call this the final five or the lightning round. I'm still trying to work out a name for this part of the segment, but I've got 5 quick questions for you, and we can kind of go through these, a little bit faster than the other questions. Are you ready?
I'll give it all good. I'll try to be more succinct, I hope.
All right. Well, let's start with the first one. What was it that was holding you back from starting your own law firm?
Fear. The fear of failure that how am I going to feed my family if this doesn't work out? That's what held me back for a while, to be frank.
You said you had 2 kids. How old were your kids when you started? Do you remember?
I think they were about 4 or 5.
Wow.
At the time. Wow. So you could see they were young, and that made it a little bit more, the trepidation was definitely higher at that point, starting it as opposed to now. Obviously I got 2 teenagers.
Yeah, well, which I'm sure has a whole different set of, issues. I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So, I'm kind of back where you were back then, well, let's move on to question number 2. What is the best business advice that you ever received?
I think the best business advice is you're going to get a lot of people that are going to tell you you can't do it and, you shouldn't do this. You should play it safe. I think the best business advice a friend gave me is, listen, you have to try and don't listen to the detractors. Believe in what you're doing, and there's going to be some fear there that's pulling you back, but you just got to fight past it. And, that was probably the best advice I gave, because I got to tell you, there was many times that I thought, look, this isn't a good idea. I shouldn't be doing this, but I just kept pushing through it.
And I bet you're glad you did.
At this point, without a doubt, I couldn't imagine if, not that it would be terrible, but I believe me, I never look back. I'm glad I did it without a doubt. You have to push yourself. Sometimes you don't want to do it, but sometimes you have to push yourself. That's what life's about.
Great. Well, can you share a with my listeners a personal habit that you have that you think contributes to your success?
I think what contributes to my success is probably my type A personality, which is good, where if I don't get certain things done in a day, it's like I have no choice but to do them, because if I don't file something that I should, it sort of eats away at me, which I don't have a choice but to keep on top of my work. I do that with the gym too. I actually, I work at home a lot of times when I'm not in court. I have a gym in my house. So it's like the same thing. It's like the gym's staring at me every day. I can't skip it. It's like I do a lot of work at home, so I know it's there. So I think the fear of getting behind helps keep me sort of always on top of things.
That's a great piece of advice. Let me ask you, so what one or two tools or resources do you use in your law practice that you would recommend to people that are starting a law practice?
I think one thing I would recommend is, especially, I think what I find lawyers have the biggest trouble in is they don't know how to generate cases. The rainmaker, we've heard that term before. I think if you're, especially in most places, if you're going to put up a website, do your research, read a lot of stuff online so you have an understanding, because I got to tell you, the first couple times I went on the internet and bought some products, I would say I overpaid and got ripped off, not because of lack of, intelligence. I think lack of knowledge. So I recommend, to read a lot about web-based marketing and search engine optimization, because I think it's harder to rip off a educated consumer. And a lot of lawyers, I got to tell you, get taken advantage of when it comes to online marketing.
I think that you're probably, I think that's correct, because I think a lot of lawyers just kind of look at it and say, okay, well, I can invest money in this and it's going to give me clients, and not really understanding what they're doing. I think that's good advice. I want to ask you a quick follow-up to that question, because, looking at, the 6 attorneys you have working with you, you've got one office there in East Lansing, and and you say you have a statewide practice. So are you virtual? Do you have a virtual law office, or do you have a physical location that everyone goes to, or how do you do that?
What we do is this: we have a real physical location with a real office in East Lansing. But what we do is we have attorneys throughout the state in different geographical areas that work for me. And, a lot of these people, believe it or not, I believe in continuity. We've had the same attorneys with me for over 10 plus years. And our staff has been together, pretty much the same staff for the last decade. And we've added some people the last year or two, but they've all been there. One of the people I went to law school with. So we've known each other a long time. So ours is different because the state is so big. Michigan is a big state.
Oh, yeah.
And, we communicate because, we communicate every single day. We communicate obviously on the internet. We communicate by text, by cell phone, where my attorneys are in different parts of the state and they handle cases there. And we just communicate every day via phone. We don't have to have a meeting in a conference room to look at each other. I mean, heck, we could Skype each other if we want to actually look at each other in the eye. So technology has really helped us, where it's not like the traditional law firm that, hey, let's all gather together. Now, we do get together, socially for functions periodically, just to get that camaraderie, but it doesn't we don't have to meet, every day, as long as we communicate. I mean, the practice of law doesn't require us to be physically near each other. We bounce ideas off each other, frankly, 7 days a week about cases and approaches to different things. So I have attorneys, honestly, scattered throughout the state.
So do you use a case management program that keeps you on top of each other, or do you have a paperless office, or what do you do?
Well, what we do too is we have every client in our firm has a case manager. We have 2 case managers, and their sole job, believe it or not, is to interact with clients and act as a liaison, to sort of be the person that if a client has a concern, they could either call the attorney specifically who's been assigned to the case. They can call the case manager, and we have 2 case managers, again, in different parts of the state. And they also can call me. I'm always available. Believe it or not, my home number and cell number are listed.
Okay.
They're not, and so is my home address. Even in the criminal practice, a lot of people find that unusual, but you know what I tell my clients? If I'm doing what I'm supposed to do right, I don't have to hide from my clients, whether it's criminal clients or not. And, they like the fact that I give out my cell number, but we all, we keep everything. Obviously, we have paper. I'm still old school where we keep our files paper, but we also keep it backed up. We keep carbonite. We back it up as well that way. So
Okay.
I like feeling paper in my hand, but I also obviously we have computer backup where I could be anywhere and pull up a file right on my carbonite and have the database. So I think we have the best of both worlds when it comes to our filing system.
And do you use a case management program?
We don't really use a case management program. We just keep the files, alphabetically. Okay. And keep in mind, we have a different type of practice where if we land 1 or 2 cases in a day, we don't have a million cases active. Believe it or not, we have a different type of practice. We get a lot of calls, but we reject a lot of cases because we don't think it's a good fit for us. Sometimes it's economic considerations, client expectation considerations. So we'll get a lot of leads and we'll maybe land a very small number of cases. Like right now with our firm, we probably have maybe 200 active cases. Now that may sound like a lot or maybe it doesn't, but we keep it still manageable where we're not dealing with thousands of people because we turn away a lot of business, believe it or not, because reputation, you're as good as your reputation. And I would say your online reputation. People, believe it or not, before they hire us, my name gets Googled, believe it or not, probably about 700-800 times a month.
Oh, yeah. I have no doubt. So, all right. Well, I'll move on to the next question. Last question of the lightning round. What book would you recommend to someone starting a law firm? Business book, law firm book, any type of book?
Well, you know what? I'm going to be a little different than your typical attorney. If I was going to recommend a book, believe it or not, I would recommend a search engine optimization book, surprisingly, from somebody by the name of Eric Ward. Eric Ward is somebody who has been in the field of search engine optimization. He's what's known as a link builder, if you're familiar with the term, where Google looks at sort of who your site is linked to and determining where you're going to rank on their search engine. And believe it or not, that to me is a good starting point because I find that's where most attorneys struggle. I think they figure out how to practice law through experience and seeing their colleagues. I think marketing is where a lot of newer attorneys struggle with. They always come to me and ask me, yeah, I can learn how to practice and how to argue and, by watching my peers and everything. But they're like, I don't know how to make the phone ring. How do I get customers to me? And that's the biggest question I get from even the older attorneys, if you want to know the truth.
Well, great. Well, thank you for that. So, last question. So if you were starting everything over from scratch and you had nothing but your laptop, your law license, and $500, what would you do in your first week?
Probably I would try to figure out how I could put together, I hate to say, a website that would rank on Google. Because to me, right now, if you don't make the phones ring, you could be the best lawyer in the world. You can't hire a secretary. You can't hire a staff. You can't help people if they don't hire you. And, it's like anything else. The best lawyer in the world who doesn't have a case is not going to really be able to help anybody. So I would probably try to figure out a way how I can do something online to get somebody to email me or contact me so I can hopefully sign them up. Help me obviously pay the bills, but also help them with their legal problem.
All right. Well, fantastic, Scott. Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciate your time today. Why don't you real quick just tell our listeners where they can find you if they're looking for you online or somewhere else and they want to get in touch with you.
Well, first of all, if you want to get in touch, my phone's certainly always open. I get calls from attorneys all the time. You could basically just Google my name, Scott Grabel, SCOTTGRABEL. You could Google, believe it or not, Michigan Criminal Attorney. That'll pull up our website on the first page of Google, which is one of our websites. Our main one is grabellaw.com. Or you could just, if you want to reach out to me, you can even email me at scottgrabel@grabellaw.com.
All right. Well, great. Well, Scott, I really, really, really appreciate you being on the call today. And if you need anything from me, let me know. But we'll talk soon, okay?
Hey, listen, I appreciate the time and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, you too. All right, so that's it for today's episode. I want to thank you again for tuning in to the Legal Marketing Made Easy podcast, and I especially want to thank Scott Grabel for being our guest today. If you need to look at the show notes for today's episode, there were a lot of resources that Scott mentioned. I'm going to include those on the show notes page, which can be found at legalmarketingmadeeasy.com/014. That's 014. So until next time, I hope you have a great week and keep marketing.
Congratulations on taking a big step towards taking control of your life, getting more clients, and building a better law practice. You can build the practice of your dreams, and Jim Hart is here to help. Download his free 6-part crash course on legal marketing by visiting legalmarketingmadeeasy.com today, and we'll see you next week on Legal Marketing Made Easy.